as a woman, but for all kinds of diversity, I will continue to be a loud voice. I recognize the value and benefit that comes to having diverse experience,
Me too.
perspectives on the team.
Welcome to Unstoppable Podcast with Harry Sardinas, inspiring conversations with influential millionaires, investors, thought leaders, entrepreneurs who are making a massive difference with their innovative products and services, and sharing the challenges and wisdom of how they sold their first million.
So why do people in corporate wait until it is the worst day of their life to start the journey to become the best day of their life? That transition can be done. You done it, but tell us your story. Something drastic happened to you, and then you decide to start your own business, or no?
I have a very weird sort of background. So first of all, I started working at age 11, like a real job, not babysitting. I worked in a hair salon doing everything except for the hair. First leadership role was at 14. I was the assistant manager of the shoe store I worked at. I've always worked multiple jobs, even when I was in university, including I was actually an actor in my youth, and the casting. And so the first business I acquired was at age 20. I bought the casting agency that represented me. So although I've always had the mindset that I was going to go, I say corporate, but actually my goal as a child and into my university years was to be a lawyer, but in the corporate world, most likely, and, until I discovered the corporate world. So I love being a leader. I love the complexity that comes with like large enterprise, but I have this incredible entrepreneurial spirit as well. So the through line of my career has been large corporate, many of which are large publicly traded companies, right? I've worked for a number of, I'm originally from Canada. I live in the US now, but like I worked for a number of Canada's largest banks. I worked in the US for American Express. I worked for IBM. I worked for Accenture, large companies, complexity. But then that first company I bought at 20, I bought my first house at 19. So I've had it sort of a real estate, flip throughout my career. I built a business that was a passion project that turned into a business. But I did it when my children were quite young. I ended up getting my family, my nanny, whatever involved in it until it got too big and I sold it. And then I bought another company. I tend to be scale up versus pure startup. So I bought a data and analytics company back in 2017 that I sold about 18 months later. Unstoppable You has been mine. I've had it for about 20 years. And that's my outlet. And so for me to do, so that's kind of been my journey. But to your question, Harry, in terms of what's the switch, I think people have intention to do it. But as I keep saying, I think fear and money often is what stops them. And then I just think they hit a wall. As you said, maybe it's the worst day of their life. They are so fed up with the politics in their organization, the leader that they're reporting to, the stuff that cascades down that they can't say no to being forced to perform. And they just go, I'm done, I'm out. And then something that was sitting here and maybe it's so nascent, they go, I'm just going to do it. They're like, what could be worse than the mental anguish I have sitting in this environment? And then they just go for it. However, that's where I would try and coach against that or start to build slowly. So if you get to that point, again, there's a little something to work with versus starting from scratch and then like waiting however long before revenue starts coming in the door.
Oh, you bought a data analysis company. That's interesting. So my next question is women in tech. What are the biggest challenge that you face? I have a female founder friend of mine. She's about to exit her company right now. But she said that the journey has been hard, especially in the fundraising, because women in tech is the more minority part in a boys club, where the boys have the money, where the boys have the expertise. She told me that she had been told several times in the raising fund side that, oh, why we don't bring a boy CTO and a CEO to take care of this? And that's the only way that we can give you the funding. But so she kept fighting and fighting and fighting, and she said, well, they want more revenue, and so they increase the revenue right to the point that the numbers spoke for themselves, big time. And on the other hand, we have all personally trained people in corporate, and I have one graduate on Harvard that she told me, Harry, I've been hired because I look good in the C-suite to have a female there. But I'm a Harvard graduated, and since I'm in this corporate, they pay me a lot of money, but nobody take me seriously. Nobody even take on board what I say. I realized after all that I've been hired just because I look good in a C-suite, but not because of my work. And she said, how more I can prove myself? I'm a Harvard graduate, I have an extensive career like everybody else in the C-suite. So tell us the biggest challenges of women in tech and how you overcome that challenge. That somebody told you that this is not a good idea for you to buy a data analyst company, being a female in tech.
It's interesting. So I will tell you, first of all, I've worked in big tech. I remember when at IBM, I walked into, and at the time, I was the most senior woman in Canada when I worked there, and then I moved to the US with them. So I walked into a meeting leading a large strategy session, and it was myself, one other woman, and 40 men. The disparity around women in tech is incredibly real, which is sad. And then when you look to like VC, PE, where the funding goes, something like it used to be 4%, but if you look at last year's data, it's down to only around 2.5% of
Wow,
VC
really?
goes to women. Yet what's interesting, if you look at like crowdfunding, like Kickstarter, et cetera, women outperform men typically in terms of their ability to raise funding. So like very different. When it's stark when you see that. Again, part of the reason why I named my LLC Unstoppable You, like there's nothing that's going to prevent me from achieving my goal or objective. So I've never been concerned about walking into a room of predominantly men. My first executive role came when I was 24 years old. I was the only woman, and I was the youngest at the time by 2 decades. And so for me, the one thing I've always believed, I'm not a fan of fake it till you make it, except when it comes to confidence. And so I showed up with confidence, even when internally I wasn't feeling it. And so I just own the room. I walk in. So for me to go and buy a data and analytics company, interestingly, I bought it from another woman. Although it was a bit of a side hustle. She wasn't really meshed in, it was in marketing. She wasn't really meshed into tech so much, which was part of the reason she was looking to sell this business. I didn't even give it a second thought, but I see it consistently, and I need to coach many women on my team to confidently own it, show up. But I also will talk to my male colleagues around the role they need to play as allies in supporting the women that are around them to allow them to progress and do more and better and potentially go and buy or build their own.
So I think I interviewed the Minister of Economy of Zimbabwe. I think it was a while ago, and he told me, Harry, we have a program there in Zimbabwe that we lend money to the farmers, and then they take this money, they grow some vegetables, and they sell those vegetables. With that money, they pay back the loans, and they can come and ask for another. And he told me something interesting. He told me, however, let me tell you something. We have a huge percentage of women paying back the loans and growing the business. On the other hand, we're not happy with men yet. So he told me, so as government, seeing the data, we're more happy to, because of course, these women, they are children, they are responsibilities, so they're taking care of the money carefully and make sure that, that these vegetables are going to be sold in a way that they can pay back the loans, and so they can grow more and they can feed the family. Whether they were not happy with the data that was coming out of men on the sense. So again, have proven that women can deal with funds. They budget the households of most of the family, I think, in the world, right? And yet we have this cultural barrier, which I think that the people that looks more are the VC, because they're missing out the huge opportunities. And so we need to keep working. And so, Victoria, why do you think that the number decreased? because we talk a lot about this subject in this podcast. I'm sure, I'm a big fan of women empowerment, and I train speakers all over the world and do our workshop shows all with sometimes even more women than men, right? So again, I make sure that I create a framework where they're comfortable and the space, right? So why things are getting worse and worse?
I won't go down a political rabbit hole here. However, sadly, I think politics has a pretty significant part to play in that, particularly in North America.
Politics were in the banks, in the venture capitalists.
I'm a Canadian that lives in the US. And, the US politics that have, reversed a lot of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. They've defunded, right? They've eliminated those roles, certainly in any government offices, and grants and funding to organizations. Heck, I was even looking, and this is public, I'm not like breaking any news, but my former employer IBM just had to pay, it was I think I saw it on Friday, the news, a $17 million penalty for DEI claims as it relates to their federal contracts, and how they had right. So, but as a result, unfortunately, I think other parts of the world are much more progressive, but if they're doing business with the US, we've seen some of them follow suit or quietly soften, the commitments that they had made, right? We used to have, around, S&P around board directors, what was going to look like. So I think, unfortunately, I think politics and the environment has played a cause around the rollback that we've had, both in women in leadership roles to the thing that we just talked about. And so I don't know when the pendulum's going to swing back again. I hope it does. I was to be a quiet voice in this, so I speak up for all kinds, by the way, not just as a woman, but for all kinds of diversity. I will continue to be a loud voice. I recognize the value and benefit that comes to having diverse experience, perspectives on the team.
Follow us for more interviews with world's most influential, audacious entrepreneurs that overcame challenges and adversity, providing you with the blueprint of how they sold their first million so you can grow your business exponentially.